most challenging thing is that we want to do so much. And with a very small team and us being so hands-on, sometimes it can be very hard to move as fast as we want to, right? Like we have 1,000 things that we want to do to move the business forward. You know, some days we're like, we just need like one big thing to launch and it to feel like a really big win, because it's a lot of small steps moving things forward until there's a big milestone. And then it's a lot of small steps and then there's a big milestone. So that could be challenging if you're not prepped for it and if you don't constantly remind yourself of like the long-term path that you're on.
Welcome everyone. My name is Martina and I'm on a mission to increase representation of early stage investors by sharing what I learned and by interviewing investors and founders. Today, I'm speaking with the co-founding team of Harlow, Andrea Wildt and Samantha Anderl. They are two marketing executives turned entrepreneurs. Previously, they co-founded Interimly, a growth marketing agency, and now are the co-founders of Harlow, for which they previously raised $1 million. Harlow is an all-in-one freelance tool that enables solopreneurs to get organized, save time, and look professional. Sam is also an invite-only member of the Forbes Business Council, where she's a regular contributor, so you can find her on Forbes. And Andrea previously was part of the founding team of Full Circle Insights, which is a marketing performance metrics company. Welcome, both of you. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you.
What a great introduction.
I know.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having us.
So I would love to just dive in. Tell me a bit about you.
Well, you just did a really great job of an intro. So you covered a lot of things. But I guess a little bit about how Andrea and I started working together. We met 8 or 9 years ago at a company called Campaign Monitor. And I was actually Andrea's first hire there. And she ultimately became the CMO there. I was the head of marketing. And so we formed a really close relationship there. We were both had a deep background in demand generation. And we just, we were there during a really fun time with the company. We grew the company from, we were part of the team that grew the company from $60 million a year to $120 million a year. We got to work on a ton of fun projects, everything from branding to really increasing organic, building free tools, thinking about rebrands, just everything that we did there was really, really fun. And then when we decided that the company was not in a stage where we wanted to continue on, we actually went out and founded what you kind of already introed everyone to, which was Interimly, our growth consulting firm. And we freelanced. We freelanced for 3 or 4 years. And, running a freelance business is running a small business. And I think that's something that Andrea and I came to terms with when running that, growth agency, is we kind of went into it for more freedom and flexibility. But in reality, it was hard, right? It was hard work running that small business. And so we ran that for 3 or 4 years, and that led us to founding Harlow, which has been quite the ride. So we're about 2 years in now, actually. I saw people giving me congratulations on 2 years with Harlow. I was like, wow. That's very wild. But yeah, that's a little bit about what we've been doing, or what I've been doing for the past 8 or 9 years.
Same. I would say before I met Samantha at Campaign Monitor, I started my career early off at Salesforce back in the early 2000s in marketing and product management. I jumped into freelancing multiple times during my career, although always on my own. So when Samantha and I went out and formed Interimly, that was, I think, more structure that I've had freelancing than I have ever in my life. And it was a much bigger business, to be honest with you, because of the structure we had. And we just had more ambitious goals at that point in time as well. And yeah, this is my second software company. But I think both Samantha and I just have this entrepreneurial spirit. So we both started a lot of side projects and hustles and things like that.
So, and Sam, you were the first hire for Andrea, but how did you find each other in terms of I want to work with this person and start a company with them? When did these conversations happen, and how did you figure out Andrea is the person, or Sam's the person that I can do this with?
Well, we had worked together in a super high stress environment for 3 to 4 years. So we already knew that we worked together really well. And that was crucial. As I said, I've started companies before. I understand the dynamics of a founding team. So I knew instantly that we could work together really well, and that we could resolve conflict together. We could have hard conversations. So it was just a no-brainer to be honest with you.
Yeah, and I think I think something that Andrea and I realized early on is that we had a lot of trust in each other, but we also had a lot of grace for one another because of the environment that we worked in. Andrea from day one trusted me to make decisions. I would say, here's what I think we should do. And she'd be like, great, go do it. And I trusted Andrea when I was working with her to fight for me and stand up for me and stand up for my decisions. And she always did. And so I think there was trust from the get-go. And there was also grace. We had really honest communication of like, oh man, I'm just feeling so burnt out, or this project isn't really for me, or I'm having a hard time personally, whatever it was. A lot of trust, a lot of grace. And I think those are two very important things when you're working with somebody long term.
Absolutely. So then, so that kind of ties into the question of like what makes your partnership work. But like when you all do have a disagreement, how do you resolve that? Because like part of being a co-founders is like there are ups and downs, and you might be on opposite sides of the spectrum at some points, and like that's okay, right? But how do you resolve those moments?
I'll let Andrea talk about one-way versus two-way doors.
Two-way doors. Okay.
One of her favorite topics, and we use it a lot.
Yeah, especially when it comes to these hard decisions. So I had a boss, we both had a boss actually, that used to talk about, when you're making decisions, is it a one-way door or a two-way door? Is it something that you can make a decision and go back and change? Or is it something that you make a decision and we are tied to this decision, or changing it is incredibly hard? So I'll give you an example. Like when we were building Harlow, an example of that is like the infrastructure that we're building on. Sure, we could change that, but it's really kind of a one-way door, because if we make a decision, going back and changing, the language that we're coding in or whatever is very expensive and arduous and not super valuable, honestly. So that was a one-way door type decision. So the first thing we do is we say, is this a one-way door or two-way door? The reality is that we're aligned on almost all one-way door decisions. If it is a two-way door, then we really start to think about, well, who's more passionate about it and who kind of owns this side of the business also. Because Samantha and I have things split up where I run product and do a lot of the like business side of things, operations and unfortunately HR, benefits. And Samantha runs the go-to-market, all of our go-to-market functions, community, things like that. So we look at, well, whose domain does this fall under and how passionate are they about it? If it's a two-way door decision, then we trust that person. We talk through it, field the disagreements, and then ultimately the decision lies with the person who owns that part of the business.
And that comes back to trust, right?
Yep.
And grace at the same time. So trusting that somebody is going to make an informed decision, that they're being thoughtful. And I always trust Andrea that she's being thoughtful. She trusts me that I'm being thoughtful. We're not making willy-nilly decisions on a whim, right? And then also grace. If somebody makes the wrong decision, that's okay. It happens. We're not always going to make good decisions. We're not always going to make the right decisions. Some things are going to fail, and that's okay.
Yeah, I really like that. I wonder if I can practice that with my partner this weekend, because we're like, love moving or like trying to buy a house, right? And like, that's a big decision. And it's like, some of it is remodel, and you're like, some remodels can be like a two-way door, but some are like buying a house is a one-way door for sure. So then Harlow, like what inspired Harlow? How did you all get started? And like, how did you know, like, this is it, and we're going to turn this idea that we have, or this pain point that we're feeling, into an actual business that we're going to start monetizing or like bring to the people?
Yeah. So when Andrea and I were running our growth agency, we actually decided at one point that we wanted to transition out of that. Well, in reality, we were talking about the next phase, right? We're like, do we grow this agency and make it larger? Do we transition and build a product? Do we build a widget? We were really kind of thinking about our next move and what we wanted to build. So the way we actually started out was by pitching each other on ideas of what we could build. So Andrea went out and researched 3 different industries and the pain points and how we could solve them. I went out, researched 3 different industries, pain points that we were seeing, how we could solve them. And we started pitching each other back and forth on, hey, we could go here, we could do this. Do we know this space? Do we not know this space? We could do this. How confident are we? And we came to this point where we started talking about the freelance market specifically. And it was just this aha moment, right? We're like, okay, we've been playing in this space for the last 4 years. Andrea spent, 10 plus years in this space. We have all of these friends and peers who have entered this space. We actually do deeply understand the pain points. There's no fan favorite tool. It just was like one aha moment after another, right? We were like, this space is huge. This space is up and coming. There's no fan favorite solution. We know this space. We're confident that we can build here. And so that just led to conversation after conversation. And when founding a company, Andrea and I started talking about building the company, I'd say probably in January, we figured out like the direction we wanted to take. We didn't go out and raise money until July. So we spent all of that time interviewing, figuring out how we were going to build it, who we were going to use to build it, what it was going to look like, what we wanted it to be, right? So there was so many conversations along the way.
I love that you all were pitching each other. Did you have like proper pitch decks, or was it just like, okay?
It was like, here's the TAM, here's the pain points, here's like a potential buyer, here's what it could look like, here's the competitors in the space, here's what's good and bad about the competitors. Oh yeah.
It's funny because it started with us. Samantha was the one that did the pitch. She was researching time tracking tools because we were talking about the time tracking tool that we were using at Internally and how much we didn't like it. So we're like, oh, let's look into that space. And so Samantha built this whole pitch and she's like, yeah, here's all the details about time tracking. But this is what's really interesting is this, this broader freelance market. And that was just like an instant excitement for both of us.
Yeah, we scrapped all of our other pitches at that moment. We're like, oh yeah, put all of that to the side. This is the space.
Yeah, all in. That's super cool. So something I'm always also curious about, because I feel like naming something is like a one-way door, or at least like a rebrand is very difficult. So how did you all land on Harlow as the name of the company?
This was also a very long process. This was also pitches back and forth between Andrea and I. You'll start to sense a pattern here, right? We're like, here's all of our options. Let's discuss them, see how we feel, how we respond. So when we started to name Harlow, we knew one thing. We knew that we wanted the brand to be empathetic, and we knew that we wanted it to feel human, right? So like the freelance space, it can be very isolating. It can be very lonely. Community is huge in this space. People want connection. They want to feel seen and heard. And so we knew that the brand had to encompass that. And so initially we went out and we started looking at human names, right? What could we name this brand that's, we wanted it to be unisex. We wanted it to be comfortable. We wanted it to feel easy, not sharp. Like we had all these feelings that we wanted the brand to encompass. And then we went out and started searching for names. So we came up with maybe 4 or 5 kind of final names that we both liked, we could rally behind. And then it honestly came down to a lot of like trademarking, figuring out what existed, what didn't exist in the space, what we thought could stand out, what we thought we could actually build a brand around. We built a brand and then we started plugging in these different names and we're like, oh, that doesn't fit. We couldn't see that brand name being connected to this, right?
Yeah.
So it was a long process.
The company was supposed to be called Archer. That was our first name. Archer was the first name, and we were so deeply tied to it and invested in it. And from a trademark perspective, it was going to be so difficult and challenging. And so we had to give up.
Yeah, and then we had Asher.
Mm-hmm. Asher was another one.
Yep. There were lots of iterations before we got to Harlow. But it's funny now, Andrea and I look back on it and we're like, we cannot imagine this being named anything else.
Yeah, I get like a sense of warmth and like humanness from the name for sure.
That's the goal, so that's great.
That's really cool. So you all were marketing executives, then you ran your own marketing agency, and now you are running a business that's growing. And I'm curious, like, a lot of people transition from like this operator role or like perhaps even like an executive role into like a founding role where all of a sudden you're doing everything and everything's your responsibility, every department, right? And like perhaps you did all of it in the beginning yourself. And then as you grow, you start to kind of like hire the right people for you. How was that transition from kind of being, marketing executives to running your agency just as the two of you to now running this like growing company?
It's been really seamless, honestly, I think for us, because one of the reasons why we went into consulting and formed Internally is that Samantha and I love to operate. We like being doers. I didn't actually love a lot of the responsibilities of being an executive. So I think getting back into consulting, we did a lot of the work. We executed ourselves. So then moving into Harlow, we're just executing across a much broader range of functions, which honestly has been kind of fun because we're learning again. And Samantha and I are both builders at heart. We both really love to learn. And some of these things, we had to figure out what support software are we going to use. This is something that I've never explored or looked into, but it was fun. So for us, I don't want to speak for you, Samantha, but for me, it's really been a fun challenge and a welcome change.
I completely agree. Like Andrea said, we're both definitely builders. We like to build things. We like to have our hands on things. It feels good. It feels good when something that you've built takes off, right? That feels really good. I will say at the same time, I think the most challenging thing is that we want to do so much. And with a very small team and us being so hands-on, sometimes it can be very hard to move as fast as we want to, right? Like we have 1,000 things that we want to do to move the business forward. And, right now, for example, we are actively seeking investment, right? So we're raising capital. We are trying to grow our customer number as quickly as possible. We're trying to develop new features in the product. We're trying to set up, tiered pricing packages. We're trying to build our community. There's all of these things that we want to do. And, some days we're like, we just need like one big thing to launch and it to feel like a really big win. Because it's a lot of small steps moving things forward until there's a big milestone. And then it's a lot of small steps and then there's a big milestone. So that could be challenging if you're not prepped for it and if you don't constantly remind yourself of like the long-term path that you're on.
It's really cool though that you all have it, like your mindset is like, we've got these little milestones that we can celebrate in between, or these little steps that we know we can knock off, because that still makes you feel like you're making progress towards those like big goals.
Totally.
Oh, yes.
And when you look back at a longer time period, even if you look at a 2-week time period, you're like, wow, we got so much done. That's wild. But sometimes in the day-to-day, that gets lost.
Something that, so I'm a product person, so I'm always thinking about the product. Something that I'm curious about as well is like when you all started Harlow, I'm sure you had like this idea of this is what the product's going to do and this is how we're going to build it. And I'm curious, like as you kind of started building things and putting things out into the world and start getting like real user feedback from people that are actually like trying things out, like have there been times when you're like, oh, this didn't work as I expected, or like, oh, we actually need to pivot our strategy a little bit and focus on this part first because while this was our biggest pain point, perhaps it's not someone else's?
Oh yes, 100%. I think a great example of this is time tracking, which is funny because Harlow grew out of time tracking. But when we did all of our interviews, it was fascinating. Freelancers hated time tracking. They didn't want it. They didn't like it. They didn't see value in it. And so Samantha and I were like, okay, in our V1, we'll have basic time tracking. And we built it and it worked, but we didn't put a lot of thought into some of the user experience because we were focused on other aspects of the application that we thought were more important. Well, then we launched, and sure enough, what did everybody care about? It was time tracking. And the interesting thing is, yeah, they hated it. They didn't like it, but they needed it. And they needed it to be so simple and easy that they didn't even know they were using it. And so it was just this interesting kind of disconnect from what we thought we heard in our user interviews to the reality of freelancers day to day. And so we ended up going back and revamping a lot of time tracking. And in fact, we're just releasing features now where you can like auto add your time logs into invoices and things like that. So, that's just a small example of something that we thought going into it, oh, we totally understand this. And then sure enough, we didn't.
Well, I mean, to your credit, you did. It's just that everyone else was like telling you otherwise. So your original hypothesis was actually accurate.
I think that goes back to, we keep a very close relationship with our users and our customers. And because we're so early in the product, we launched in April, it's January, we're kind of maybe barely getting out of this like MVP stage, right? We're getting to the place where like the product's to parity. We feel really good about it. It's very stable. People are loving it. But this first few months, we were getting a lot of feedback from users and from customers and from signups. And it's always really interesting to think through like wants and needs, right? Because there are some things that people want that they may not even like use every day. It's actually maybe not going to make the product better, but it's also a delight for them. And that is meaningful. Like needs are meaningful, but delights are also meaningful, right? When Andrea and I first started building Harlow, we're like, okay, we don't want this to just meet people's needs. We want people to love using this. And for people to love using a product, you have to go past meeting their needs and you kind of have to meet their wants. But it's a delicate balance, right? Of like building the infrastructure to make sure that this is like top tier software that is meeting your need and your use case and that it's really valuable. Then also add those elements of delight that are going to get people to talk about you and spread the word about you. So that's always, I don't know, Andrea and I always come back to that conversation when we get user feedback. We're like, where does this fall? Where does this fall and what's important? Sometimes it's hard to dive through. We're like, okay, for every 10 needs, we need 2 wants, right? That make people feel really good. It's a delicate balance.
Well, yeah, and being able to provide those wants to, especially to your early customers that they're taking a chance on us, they're investing in us. It feels really good for everybody. It feels good for us to be able to support them and build that for them, and it feels really good for them because they understand that we're listening to them, which I think is unfortunately not as common as you would expect in early stage software development.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think like when I think about your process and how you've kind of landed where you are, in my mind, I'm like, those are all like, that's like the recipe for success, right? It's like staying close to the customer, listening to what they need and building for the needs, but then also giving the little moments of delight that just like makes their experience so much better. Cause like, this is probably the least favorite part, right? Is like dealing with the business side of things because they are solopreneurs for a reason and they want to work on their craft for a reason. And so making that as delightful as possible or as easy as possible so they can spend their time on that, I'm sure is like a total game changer for them. So we're going to move on to fundraising then. You all have already raised $1 million in funding, which is amazing. Congratulations. And you're now in another fundraising round. So walk me through like, how did you all even like raise the first round? When did you decide like it's time for us to raise money and why are you doing it again, for instance? Or like, what are the milestones you're trying to hit there? Just kind of walk me through your process.
So I will say that these 2 rounds are very different. Yes. And so the reasoning and goals behind the first round, very different than the reasoning and goals behind this round. And Andrea, I'll let you take us through the first round, friends and family.
So the first round was friends and family round when Samantha and I decided that we wanted to launch the company. We're like, all right, we just need a little bit of financial support because we are, we're go-to-market experts and executives. We're not developers. And so we needed to fund development. So we have a team in Argentina that is actually building Harlow for us. So we have, 4 developers, QA, project manager, part-time kind of CTO over there as well. But that costs money. So we realized that we needed to fund this. And at first we were like, oh, we just need, $200,000. And we actually started talking to a bunch of our friends that were also founders and angel investors and VCs, and everybody, our friends so kindly and gently laughed at our $200,000 number and said, triple that. It's going to take twice as long. It's going to cost twice as much. And so we modeled out the business and we're like, all right, we think we can get someplace meaningful with raising $1 million. And so we went out and we tackled this in a very methodical way. We put together a spreadsheet of everybody we thought we could go after, engaged excellent legal representation that helped kind of guide us through setting terms, things like that. The friends and family round was honestly really fun to raise because that was pre-product. So it's all about the dream. It's all about, people taking a chance on you as founders and your vision and your experience. And so that was, I think, much more fun for me than this round.
Well, and it's also interesting because you're pitching, for the most part, during the Friends and Family round, we're pitching people that know us. And Andrea and I, we we've been very trustworthy to our colleagues and our peers, and they've seen us work and they've seen us grow and they've seen us, launch really cool things. And so we had all of that on our side during the first round, which I will say that was extremely lucky for us. Like, it was extremely lucky that we had a vast network of people who not only believed in us, but also had the financial means to support us. And I will say up front, that's like a privileged place to be, because not everybody has that. We talk about our first round and we're like, it was easy, it was great. But when we talk to other founders and people founding companies, we're like, if it's not easy, that's okay. That doesn't mean that you're not excellent. It doesn't mean that your idea is not excellent. It just means that you maybe don't have that network or background to rely on. So just wanted to throw that out there for anyone that's listening, that we're like, it's great, it was easy, we raised $1 million, but we were lucky.
We were lucky.
Good, and we're lucky.
It wasn't easy. Yeah, it was just easy compared to this round.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that call out. Yeah, because I think especially like a lot of times, like something I'm also thinking about it like in this process, right? Is like trying to talk to underrepresented founders or founders that didn't like go to business school, like don't necessarily have like come from like a network of individuals or from a certain class, or like their family doesn't isn't in a certain class that then has their own network of people, right? And like, how do you succeed in that? And I think it's really important, and I appreciate the call out that like it's really, in the end, ultimately it's about the business, right, and the idea, and everyone takes different amounts of time, and that's okay.
Absolutely. I will say the one thing, regardless of how big or vast your network is, every conversation that you have matters. So if you're going to go out and raise a friends and family round, a pre-seed round, whatever you want to call it, every conversation matters. There are people that we were not even going to reach out to because we were like, I don't know if they would give us like their attention. I don't know if they're really interested. I don't know if they're in the right space. But there were a lot of those people who were on our like, ooh, should we reach out? Should we not reach out? That connected us to somebody. That connected us to somebody else. That connected us to somebody else, right? Yeah. And so one of the things Andrea and I were like, we just need to reach out to everybody. Every conversation matters. We need to take the time. We just need to tell everybody what we're doing, because you never know where that conversation or those first invested dollars are going to come from. And that's hard. It's like, it can give you that like feeling in your gut. It's very scary to put yourself out there, but you have to.
Yeah, that's really great input. So you all are fundraising again. The market has changed significantly in the meantime as well. So I'm curious, like, this round, what is it like? Are you feeling market conditions as well?
We're definitely feeling market conditions.
Yeah, this round is very interesting. So this round, we're actually going after some institutional dollars. We took very few institutional dollars in our first round. So this is a new strategy, a new approach. The product's in a different place, the team's in a different place. And I would say we got very methodical around this round as well. We went out, we did a ton of research. Andrea put together this massive list of, 200 plus different firms, angel groups, VCs to reach out to. She went out and did all this research. Do they invest in our space? Do they look like we enjoy working with them? Do they have companies in their portfolio that match up? Do they understand the self-service business? She went out and did all this research, right? So that's one thing. Research and prepping for a fundraise is taxing. And I'll let Andrea chime in there as well, because she did most of it.
It is, but one of the things that I think I didn't really realize going into it that is very clear to me now is that this round is a lot harder for us because it's hard to get into these VCs. It's hard to get an initial meeting because it's cold outreach. I would say 95% of the time goes unresponded to. And so it's a lot of like trying to make connections with people that know somebody in-house that then actually follows through and makes the connection, etc. So it is a lot harder just from a time and logistics standpoint to actually even talk to a human being and get that initial connection.
Yeah, there's like 70% of the work that's done before you get a meeting with somebody. It's the building the list, crafting the outreach, sending the, intro requests, right? Hitting up your friends and family and network to get intros, and then sending out all the cold pitches, finding people on LinkedIn, connecting with them. Like it's a lot of work before you even get into the meeting. And I will say, I think overall we have seen, I think, a pretty high response rate. We've had, 20, 25 meetings at this point. We just started raising, I would say, probably really seriously, probably about a month ago. And so we're getting lots of meetings, but it is interesting. You can have a meeting, and Andrea actually gave me this heads up very early on. She's like, hey, even if the meeting goes great, you had a great conversation, you connected with somebody, you're still pitching, they're pitching your company against the 12 other companies that they've talked to that week. Right? So it is just, it's tough.
Yeah, it's really competitive.
And and we've heard even from multiple people that we've talked to, they're like, hey, I love you guys. I love the product. I fought for you hard, and I still got overruled because of one thing or another, right? It could be, some people are like, hey, just for RBC specifically, we, actually seen our investments in the enterprise be more valuable than investments in self-service. So we're going to pass, right? Or somebody might say, we're actually going really heavy into CPG, and we've seen that really take off. So we're passing on this tech investment, right? So it's all these different opinions and people that are working together to try to figure out if your company is the one that's going to have the 10x return.
Taking your experience then from like the previous friends and family round and this round, like what's something that you wish you had known going into it that could have prepared you in a different way?
I wish we'd known 2 years ago what was going to happen in the market.
Sure. Ideally.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that I'm learning and that we're both growing into in our pitches and in our outreach and how we're handling this is that you have to talk big. You have to, there's no room for being humble. There's no room for, you have to sell the big vision in a very articulate and clear way. And you have to believe and sell your belief that this company has potential to be massive, right? People that you talk to want to know that you believe that you can build a $100 million company. And if you can't bring that through in your outreach and in the way that you're communicating with people can sense that, right? We have a good pal who multiple times now along our journey has been like, hey, you guys, I know this feels icky, and I know it might be everything you hate, but you have to get bigger. You have to sell yourselves harder. You have to make your vision larger, right? And so I think we're starting to lean into that, and I think those conversations are going really well, but it's kind of scary, right? Committing when you're at this stage to saying, yes, I believe I can build a $100 million company. We do, but that's also a big risk to say it, right?
Right, because then you're going to be held to it. That's super interesting. So what about, Andrea, you mentioned market conditions. So I'm curious, how is that affecting the conversations you're having?
I mean, some VCs are just simply not doing early stage investing right now. They're saving their funds for add-ons to current investments. Valuations have changed quite drastically in the past 2 to 3 years. And I think Sam and I are grateful that we didn't get out of hand. We didn't let ourselves get out of hand when we set the value for our friends and family round. So in that sense, I think we're actually in pretty good shape. But there's just less money out there, and there's a lot of people going after the same funds. And then you also just look, the data doesn't lie. Only, 2% of female founders get funded. Or 2% of all, VC money goes to female founders. And so we have that working against us as well.
Yeah, it's the female only teams, which is what you all are. And Yeah, it blows my mind.
I think everything that Andrea said, and one other really interesting thing that we keep hearing. So we'll start a conversation with somebody and they'll say, we invest, there's no stage that's too early for us. We invest at every
Yes.
stage. And then we'll have a conversation and they'll be like, actually, you're too early for us. We want, $20,000 in MRR. And Andrea and I are like, if we were at $20,000 MRR, we don't even know if we'd be talking to you. We'd be just growing this business. So it's interesting. I think that ties back into what Andrea said, that even like the companies that used to invest at the very earliest stages are now going, kind of one or two stages up. And I think sometimes maybe I don't even know if it's like conscious or subconscious, but that they're just, when they're figuring out where to put their dollars, they're looking for a more proven track record, specifically in traction versus product and team and dream. Like I think it's less product, team, dream right now, and it's more traction and have you actually proven product market fit.
Parting thoughts on fundraising before we move on to the next section.
So my parting thought for anybody out there that is raising or getting ready to raise is to make sure you have your people and your community behind you, because this is not for the faint of heart. It is, it's emotionally taxing. It's super challenging. There are really high highs and really low lows, and sometimes multiple times in a day. So really just having your support system is really, really crucial as you're building a business and as you're going through this.
Absolutely. I would say go into it with the mindset that a no should not be discouraging. It should be a learning opportunity. So I think, taking, even when Andrea and I are getting no's and people are like, hey, this isn't the right fit, the feedback that people are giving to us has been extremely helpful. So don't just leave a no as a no. Take the feedback, reflect on it, understand it. Don't be afraid to make transitions and iterations as you're going through the process. Andrea and I have edited our deck 15 times. We've been fundraising for a month, right? We're like, oh, that's actually a really great point. Or like something as simple as like, we should change the color on our MRR versus our churn. Like it's just small things. Just listen to feedback, take feedback, try to learn and grow from it, and try not to get hunkered down in, oh, they said no, that makes me feel bad. They don't like me, they don't like the product. Because it's not the case. It's just really competitive. So use it, learn from it.
That's great input. So we're going to go on to the next section, which is never again. I used to do this with my product team back in the day, where we would talk about things that we messed up and we would never do again, which sometimes was true and sometimes wasn't. So I'm curious from y'all's perspective, what is something that you kind of completely messed up and you hope to never again do?
This is a hard question. Andrew and I were actually talking about this earlier. We're like, what is your answer to this question?
I have so many of them.
I know.
I mean, I've sent a mass email to our entire unsubscribe list. It got really good open rates, but that was terrible. I've overwritten data in the CRM. I have committed to a release date to a big client and then couldn't hit it. All of these things that feel super, super massive in the moment. And then in the grand scheme of things, I look back on them and I'm like, that was a good learning. We're human. We all make mistakes. It's okay.
Totally. I think the biggest mistake that I've made, and I think we've definitely course corrected, and this is something we talk about all the time, is I used to just say yes to everything and take so many meetings. Like when we were at Campaign Monitor, we would have meetings sometimes from like 7 a.m. in the morning until 7 p.m. at night. We were working with teams internationally, and it's just a quick path to burnout. It doesn't give it didn't give me space for creativity. I wasn't doing my best work when I'm just in meetings and like context switching so often. And so I will say a big learning from me, and something that, I was even guilty of this when we went into consulting. We went from Campaign Monitor to consulting, and we were like, hey, we're going to protect our schedules and we're going to keep flexibility and creative time and work time. And all of a sudden our calendars were getting really busy, right? We're like, ooh, actually, we could make a lot of money if we just took on 2 more clients, and it'll just make our calendars a little bit more busy. And then you're like overbooked before you realize that you're overbooked. And so that is really important for me. I know that when I'm overbooked, I'm not doing my best work. And, you know, some of those conversations can be really stimulating and really engaging, but you just need downtime to work. And I think that's something that I've understood about myself, you know, through my past 10, 12 years of like professional life, is just, I can't overbook myself. It hurts me at work, it hurts me, you know, mentally, physically, you know, you get out of shape, your mental health gets out of shape, your work suffers. It's just, yeah, I think that's a big learning for me. Also, a small mishap that I will share that Andrea and I were just talking about. I actually just misread my calendar last week and missed a big investor meeting. So we're in the middle of fundraising. Like, we're so intent. We are, you know, we're really managing our calendars well. We're trying not to overbook. And in the midst of all that, I still missed an investor meeting because I misread my calendar by 30 minutes. So things happen.
I've done that before. Yeah. I showed up. Well, I ended up showing up 5 minutes late, but I was so frazzled, and it was, and there was like a little emergency that happened with one of my dogs. And so I was like frazzled, like panicked about the dog, show up. And I was just like, oh God, it took me like 15 to 20 minutes in like a 30-minute meeting. And I'm already 5 minutes late, right? There, like 10 minutes left to like recover. And finally, like,
yes,
you can tell people are relaxing, the space is getting better, but you're just like, boy, I messed that.
That's exactly what happened with me. I had chaos with my dog in the morning, and then I was just kind of recovering from it. And I was actually prepping for the meeting during the meeting time, which is funny. So I could have been there and could have been ready, but I just, you know, personal things were happening and I just completely misread my calendar. They were super gracious. They were very kind, understanding, and rebooked with us. So it all ended up fine.
Yeah, I understand that for sure. Especially like, I'm such a, not necessarily perfectionist, but I'm timely, you know, I like to start meetings on time. I like to end them on time, you know, like all this stuff. And then when I just like am late, I'm just like, oh God. And then I loop on it, which isn't great either.
Got to give yourself a little grace though. We all mess up.
Totally. All right. So we are wrapping up. Would love to kind of know from you all, for someone who's starting out as a founder, what kind of advice would you have for them?
So 2 pieces from me. Number 1, pick your co-founder or co-founders very wisely. That's all I'm going to say on that. Just really put some thought into what it's going to look like when things get really rough, because they inevitably will, and make sure that you have, this is a type of person that you also want to spend all day with, every single day, the good and the bad. And the second is to give yourself some time, especially at the beginning. I think a lot of times as builders and entrepreneurs, we get excited about something and we're like, let's go, let's just do it. And I think at the beginning in particular, it is really helpful to take a step back and do a little bit of planning before you start raising money, before you launch the product, to really think about how you want this to play out. What type of business do you want to build? Because that informs a lot of these decisions, how you build it, how you raise money, the terms, things like that. So give yourself some time in the beginning, because then once you get going, as you know, it's just nonstop.
Absolutely. What I was going to say actually ties very well into the last thing you said there, Andrea, and that's, think about the why. Why are you building? And you really need to hold on to that, because it can get lost, right? Like Andrea and I, you know, we had a lot of different layers of why. Like, we wanted to build something. We also wanted to deeply help freelancers, but we also wanted to create a space in which we could both thrive professionally, and anyone that we hired or worked with could thrive professionally. And so we have all of these layers of why we're building and how we want to build. And I think that's really important up front, because like Andrea said, when things start to move quickly, it can get away from you, and you need to revisit the why. Why am I doing this? Why is it important to me? Why do I want to do this for the next 5 to 10 years? Because you're not just building something for a year or 2 years. I mean, we're already 2 years into our journey, which is wild to say, but we have so just so far to go. And we always have to come back to the why. Why are we doing this? Are we still passionate about the why? Do we still believe in the why? So map that out in advance and hold on to it.
That's great input. So we're going to go to another section, which is rapid round. And I did not send these to you all. And so this is really just like what comes to you first thing. So I'm curious, you all have been freelancers, and as a freelancer, what do you dislike more? Doing your expenses or sending a follow-up for an invoice?
Expenses.
Follow-up.
I love sending invoices.
Hate sending invoices. Which is why we split in our freelance business.
I was like, what's really funny is that, I was the one that sent out the invoices, and Andrea is the one that did our expense management. So these answers don't surprise me. Yep.
That's hilarious. Okay. Lake or ocean?
Ocean.
Okay. Because Sam, you live by a lake, right?
I do. And I love it. And it's extremely beautiful, but there is like no more soothing sound than like waves crashing on a beach. It's like my favorite thing in the entire world.
Yeah, totally. Okay, last one. Pumpkin seed or pre-seed?
Pre-seed.
Pre-seed.
Okay, cool. Great. Well, that kind of really wraps it up. I'm curious, like, what do you have going on? Where can people find you? Like a Twitter account, LinkedIn, whatever. And I'll make sure to put those in the description as well.
I'm actually pretty active on social. I talk about balance and building a business and the freelance space, future of work, all of that on a regular basis. You can find me on Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram. I hate to say TikTok, but also TikTok. And it's just at Samantha Anderl on all of those platforms. And you can also follow Harlow. We have a lot of these same conversations about giving yourself grace and mental health and boundaries and balance. And that's just at Meet Harlow on all of those same platforms.
Well, you're better off following Samantha and Harlow because they're much more active than I am. But you can find me at The Littlest Flea on Twitter.
Amazing. Great. Well, thank you all so much for spending an hour with me. This was so interesting. I learned a lot, and I'm not starting anything, but I'm like, let's do it. I'm like pumped, ready to
go. Yes. Thank you so much for having us. This was actually a really fun moment of reflection in the midst of our round, and actually got me excited to dive back in. So thank you.
Here. It was good therapy for us.
It was.
What an inspiring conversation. I loved speaking with Andrea and Sam. These kind of moments really give me so much energy, and it's why I love having these kind of conversations. I hope you had some great takeaways. Let me know in the comments what you thought, and I can't wait to see you soon. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share with a friend.